Kazakhstan is in the middle of very violent civil unrest. Will the current violent unrest in Kazakhstan force Russia to recalculate its calculus towards invading the Ukraine and annexing the region of Donbas? Welcome to the World Econ News, your daily dose of economics and finance. If you're interested in topics influencing the world's economies and global financial flows, this is the place for you. Watch till the end if you want to get the latest on everything. And don't forget to subscribe, like, and hit the notification button to get the latest updates. Let's go. Allow me first to introduce you to Kazakhstan before we jump into the current hot and volatile crisis there. Kazakhstan is a very large Central Asian country and former Soviet state. It's equal in size to the whole of Western Europe, yet it has a population of only 20 million people. Its location is very strategic because it links the large and fast-growing markets of China and South Asia with those of Russia and Western Europe by road, rail, and a port on the Caspian Sea. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, it became an independent country, and thanks to its immense wealth of natural resources such as oil, gas, and uranium, among others, its addition to strong foreign investments, upbeat agriculture and livestock sector, and aggressive structural reforms, it's achieved remarkable rapid economic progress since it gained independence in 1991. According to the World Bank, as of 2015, Kazakhstan became an upper-middle income country. However, since half of the country's population lives in rural and economically isolated areas with poor access to public services, they're not enjoying this economic progress and are vulnerable to poverty. Since the COVID-19 pandemic began, poverty became prevalent in rural and isolated areas while unemployment in urban areas skyrocketed. So what's really happening in Kazakhstan? Well, since January 2nd, 2022, violent civil unrest began gripping the less fortunate half of the country due to a decades-long accumulation of economic hardships, rising inequality, extreme corruption, and most recently, a massive increase in fuel prices. The trigger that led to the current riots was the decision by the government on January 1st to lift the price caps on liquefied petroleum gas, which is used to operate most vehicles in Kazakhstan. The move caused the price of fuel to skyrocket, roughly doubling overnight. However, the government of Kazakhstan took some measures in order to restore calm. Its president, Tokayev, offered some conciliatory gestures. He dismissed the government and walked back the gas price increase. According to some experts, former President Nursultan Nazarbayev, who ruled the country from the late Soviet era to 2019 and continues to act as an unofficial behind-the-scenes leader, probably is the driving force behind the government offer of concessions. Nevertheless, experts and analysts agree that such a move will not suffice as a tool to end the riots and unrest. Why? Because there are numerous other reasons and causes behind the riots, such as extreme inequality, negligence of rural and isolated areas, corruption, unemployment, inflation, and the lack of democracy. It's also suggested the extreme deadly measures undertaken by the government to tame the riots will lead to tens of thousands of deaths among civilians and the police, and will continue to create anger. Indeed, Kazakhstan has been ruled by the same people and parties since the Soviet era. According to the World Economic Forum, corruption is Kazakhstan's biggest problem. The World Bank also listed Kazakhstan as a corruption hotspot. On January 7th, Kazakhstan's president ordered his forces to shoot to kill to deal with disturbances from those he called bandits and terrorists, a day after Russia sent troops to put down a countrywide uprising. However, experts agree that even if the security forces crush protests in the main commercial city of Almaty, they may continue for longer in the area of Zhanaozen, which has a history of anti-government strikes and demonstrations. Then why is Russia sending troops to Kazakhstan under the label of peacekeeping? Right after the riots began, President Tokayev called on the Collective Security Treaty Organization, CSTO, which is a Russian-dominated regional security bloc, for help in quelling the violence. Russian peacekeepers began arriving as early as January 6th. The move by Kazakhstan's President Tokayev to call on the CSTO and Russia for help is a risky move. Even the businesses and political elites are unnerved by the arrival of Russian forces. They're concerned about Kazakhstan's sovereignty and the potential rise of nationalist sentiment, which could lead to further civil unrest and riots. Despite the rise of theories that the West is behind the crisis and their aim is Russia and the oil pipelines that feed China, experts and most Kazakhs disagree because it was not the West that raised the fuel prices. On the contrary, Western investors are estimated to have more than $400 billion invested in the oil-rich country. The Netherlands alone has more than $90 billion invested in the country, followed by the USA. Even the Kazakhs themselves agree that the closed totalitarian political system, corruption, and equality are the main factors behind the crisis, which was expected due to consistent and continuous mismanagement, ignorance, and negligence by the government. It's safe to say here that Kazakhstan's wealth from oil, gas, uranium, coal, agriculture, and livestock has not been translated into wealth by the people, hence the riots and unrest. I have to remind you here that oil and other natural resource assets do not always translate into wealth due to the markets and price volatility, in addition to greed, monopolization by foreign investors and their prospective governments. Now to the big second question here. Will the current violent unrest in Kazakhstan force Russia to recalculate its calculus towards invading Ukraine and annexing the region of Donbas? The answer is yes. The entire region of Central Asia, and especially the former Soviet republics of Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, and Turkmenistan, are of immense importance to Russia economically and geopolitically. There are millions of Russians who are citizens of these nations. Russia also has serious investments in these nations. They also constitute a barrier that helps it keep its southern borders secure. They also represent a buffer zone that keeps American military operations at a distance. One look at the map and you'll realize how immensely important Kazakhstan is to Russia. They have a shared border, 7,640 kilometers long. All the other Central Asian states are located to the south of Kazakhstan, hence Russia cannot afford anything but a stable pro-Russian Kazakhstan. Afghanistan is also a Central Asian state. Since the United States withdrew from Afghanistan, it tried to make Kazakhstan more involved in terms of providing strategic support and regional influence in promoting peace and security in Afghanistan. Western influence on Central Asian states is of great concern to Russia. If these states begin to move west, it will mean that Russia can no longer prevent the USA and NATO from establishing military bases right at its southern doorstep. According to experts, Russia can afford to lose all Central Asian states, but not Kazakhstan. China also cannot afford to lose Kazakhstan as a strong ally and trading partner, because 5% of its natural gas comes from there. Kazakhstan is positioned between China and Europe. It's a crucial link in the Belt and Road Initiative, and was where Xi announced the massive infrastructure project. This means the future of Kazakhstan can influence not just the Chinese economy, but also its ambitions in taking over Taiwan and the South China Sea, where it's trying to claim more than 80% of it as Chinese naval territories. Since minute one of the crisis, both Russia and China have mobilized to curb further destabilization and violence in Kazakhstan. Even major Western nations are hesitant to tackle the issue with more than mere words because their immense investments there are at risk. All these issues contribute to the fact that Russia is well on its way to recalculate its plans for invading the Ukraine, because such mobilization might also not only lead to harsh sanctions, but also to serious mobilization by the UN, USA, NATO, and the EU to gain more influence and access to Kazakhstan, which has a strong base of nationalists who are fierce opponents of Russian military presence and intervention. Kazakhstan is a rich country, but corruption and greed by foreign investors and their allies in its government are leading to serious economic hardships for at least half of the country's population. Its size and strategic location are of great interest to the three superpowers, Russia, China, and the USA, along with NATO. It's still too early to know what the future holds for the good people of Kazakhstan, but it seems that their faith is becoming increasingly tied to those of Taiwan and the Ukraine. Would you like to learn more about what influences the world economies and global financial flows? Click on one of the videos that shows up on the left or go to our channel to find other interesting topics. See you next time.